I want to ask you something, dear viewers, before I begin. Have you ever been hit by someone you loved? Not just once, but beaten like an animal? Have you ever been left alone in a hospital room, tubes in your arm, no money, no visitors, just you and your slow, aching breath? I'm not telling you this to gain sympathy. I'm telling you this because it's real. Because I lived it. Because somewhere out there, another mother is suffering in silence, just like I did. If you or someone in your family has ever faced anything like this, please tell your story in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, not for me, but for all the women who need to know they're not alone. Now let me begin. My name is Martha Ellington, and I was born in a small Australian town where life teaches you how to suffer before it teaches you how to survive. I used to work at a bakery. I made just enough to keep myself alive after my husband died. I had one son, Derrick. He was the last person I thought would ever let me fall. And yet, it wasn't a stranger who did this to me. It was my own flesh and blood. And the monster he married, Sophia. Sophia was all charm when they got engaged. Blonde hair, tall, high heels clicking like power with every step. The first time she smiled at me, I felt cold. She moved into my house without asking. And from that day forward, I stopped being a mother and started being her maid. She tore my pillows, wore my jewelry, and one day, she slapped me so hard I bled from my nose. When Derrick came home and saw me sitting on the floor holding a blood-soaked towel, you know what he said? "Mom, don't be dramatic. You probably tripped or something." No, Derrick. She did this. And that was just the beginning. She stopped feeding me unless I begged, sometimes made me sleep on the wet back porch, and every time I cried, she said, "You're old and useless. You should be grateful we let you live here." One night, after I had fainted from hunger, she poured a bucket of cold water on my face. My clothes clung to my skin, my bones were shivering, and I said, "Why are you doing this to me?" And she said, "Because you're nothing, and you'll always be nothing." But I didn't die. I didn't beg God to take me. Instead, I began to watch, to plan, and to wait. Because when the time came, I swore, they will crawl to me one day. Viewers, have you ever been in a room where the walls feel like they're watching you? Where every corner holds a memory you wish you could erase? That was my kitchen. The same kitchen where I once made birthday cakes for my son. Now I was crawling on its floor, begging for leftovers from Sophia's plate. One evening, I watched her place a juicy chicken thigh into the dog's silver bowl while I sat in the corner clutching my stomach, shaking from hunger. She locked eyes with me and said with a smirk, "Martha, animals eat first. You can lick the bones after if you like." And Derrick? My son? He sat there chewing silently, his eyes never meeting mine. Not even when I whispered, "Please," Sophia started feeding me like I was less than a pet. Cold rice once a day. No salt. No spoon. Just a cracked bowl. And whenever I had to go to the hospital for my blood pressure or dizzy spells, she'd tell the driver not to wait for me. Once, I collapsed on the hospital floor after an overnight stay. I had no phone, no money, no shoes. The nurse said, "Ma'am, is someone coming to pick you up?" I said, "They told me to find my own way." She looked at me like I was a stray dog. And maybe I was back then. Dear viewers, if you've ever been left at the hospital alone, please type "yes" in the comments. And tell me which country you're from, because pain like this doesn't care about borders. It happens everywhere. And don't forget to like and share this story. Maybe someone out there needs to hear it. You want to hear how cruel Sophia was? She once forced me to beg on the street just to prove a point. She gave me a torn scarf and pushed me out the door with these words, "Let's see how long it takes you to realize you're better off dead." I sat near the bus station for hours, holding a paper cup. Strangers walked by. Some gave me coins. Some gave me looks. And when I came home that night with a few crumpled dollars in my hand, you know what she did. She slapped me for not bringing enough. "Couldn't even sell your dignity properly, huh?" she hissed. That night, I stared at the ceiling and thought, this isn't life. This is a punishment. But God, or fate, or whatever you want to call it, wasn't done with me yet. Because in the darkest hour, something happened that changed everything. I found a letter. A dusty, folded envelope in a box that hadn't been opened in 20 years. It had my name on it. And when I read it, my hands started shaking. I wasn't poor. I was the legal heir to a fortune. But they didn't know. Not yet. Dear viewers, if you're still here, thank you. Please comment where you're watching from and tell me, have you ever stayed silent just to survive? Have you ever let someone slap you, curse you, break your body, just so you could buy time? Because that's exactly what I did. I found the letter tucked beneath a pile of yellowed newspaper clippings, an old, crumpled envelope hidden inside my late husband's trunk. The writing was faint, but the words were sharp. To Martha Ellington, the sole heir to the Winston Trust estate. My husband, James, had never told me. And I hadn't even remembered that the Winston Trust was part of his bloodline through his great-uncle in Melbourne, a man worth millions. Apparently, when he passed, he left a clause in his will that stated the estate would fall to the surviving spouse only if she was living in hardship at the time of his death. I hadn't touched that money because I didn't know it existed. But now I was the exact definition of living in hardship. And it was all legally mine. But I didn't rush. I didn't scream. I didn't run to claim my throne. No. I folded that letter gently, put it under my mattress, and I went back into that kitchen, just in time for Sophia's rage. She screamed because her favorite lipstick had gone missing. Then she stormed into my room, yanked my pillow off the bed, and before I could say a word, crack. The back of her palm landed on my cheek. I saw stars. But I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just looked at her and whispered, "You should enjoy this while it lasts." She paused, just for a second. Then she leaned closer and sneered. "What did you say, rat?" I said, "Hit me harder. It'll make your fall even more painful." She slapped me again. Twice. Then threw my slippers out the window. That night, while she and Derrick slept in their soft bed upstairs, I sat in the corner of the hallway floor, clutching the letter to my chest. And I whispered to myself, "Soon, Martha. Soon they'll kneel." To everyone watching this, please leave a comment if you've ever kept a secret that saved your life. And don't forget to like and share this story. Someone might need this strength. Because from that night on, I was no longer their victim. I was their executioner in waiting. Do you know what it's like to sleep on a cold floor with broken ribs and millions waiting for you untouched? Because that was me. I could have marched into a lawyer's office the very next morning, slammed the inheritance letter on their desk, and watched Sophia fall to her knees in horror. But I didn't, because revenge tastes best when it's cooked slowly. And I wasn't done watching. So I woke up that morning like any other, hair tangled, lips dry, stomach empty. Sophia stood by the kitchen counter with her espresso and sneered. "You look disgusting, Martha. I hope you're not planning to go outside. You'll scare the neighbors." I nodded and shuffled to the corner where I usually sat. Not a word from Derrick. His eyes were glued to his phone. Not even when I coughed up blood into a napkin. Not even when I winced trying to sit down. That's how broken our home was, a mother bleeding in front of her child, and no one flinched. Viewers, I need to ask, have you ever been sick and ignored by the very people who should have held your hand? Please comment below and tell me what country you're from. It happens everywhere. In every language. In every house that hides a monster in lipstick and heels. I washed Sophia's underwear that day. She made me do it by hand, scrubbing at the sink while she filmed a TikTok video laughing in the background. "Look at my maid. So loyal," she said to her followers. But what they didn't know was the maid was about to become the madam. That evening, after they left for a birthday dinner I wasn't invited to, I sat at their glass dining table, my fingers bruised, eyes swollen, and I opened a second envelope. This one was from the law firm, Winston and Hart, Trust Executors. The letter had just arrived in the mail. I'd intercepted it before Sophia noticed. "Dear Mrs. Ellington, as per the conditions of the Winston Trust, We are prepared to release your inheritance of 6 million Australian dollars, including 3 properties and a controlling stake in Ellington Mining Ltd. I couldn't breathe. I wasn't just rich. I was powerful. And yet, I folded the letter, tucked it in my bra, and washed Sophia's wine glass when she returned that night because the time wasn't right. Not yet. Because power isn't about money, my friends. It's about patience. Like this video if you believe karma always finds its way. Share it with someone who needs to see what quiet women are capable of. And if you're still with me, just wait. Wait until you hear what I did next. Have you ever had to clean the very floor someone spat on you over? I have. And let me tell you something, dear viewers, when you finally stand above them in silence, watching them clean your shoes, it doesn't feel like revenge. It feels like justice. But we're not there yet. I told no one about the inheritance. Not even the neighbor I trusted, not even the nurse at the clinic who once gave me free medicine. Because secrets are like seeds, you bury them deep so they can grow strong. That week, Sophia beat me twice. Once for folding her blouse the wrong way. Once for daring to touch her good wine glass while washing the dishes. Derrick watched both times and said nothing. Sophia laughed as I lay on the floor. Maybe if you die soon, we can finally get rid of your smell. I stared at the chandelier above me, that gaudy thing she always bragged about. And in my heart, I whispered, I'll be the one to change that bulb next. In my house. Because yes, I bought it that same week. I called Winston and Hart quietly from the library computer when Sophia went for her hair appointment. They confirmed everything. 6 million Australian dollars, a power of attorney, and the deed transfer process already in motion. I paid the back taxes on the house, cleared Derrick's debts behind his back, and bought the house outright. But I didn't move out. No. I let them keep hitting me in the house that was now legally mine. Why? Because I wanted to hear Sophia call me worthless in the living room I now owned. I wanted to sweep the same floor she threw her wine glass on and wait until she begged me not to throw her out. And I swear on every scar I've carried, that moment came sooner than you'd think. Dear viewers, if you've ever dreamed of getting back what they stole from you, comment, I believe below. Tell me what they took. And don't forget to like and share this story, because somewhere, a woman needs to hear that it's not over for her. You see, I didn't just want my house back. I wanted my soul back. And this was just the beginning. Viewers, do you know what it's like to look your abuser in the eyes, knowing you now have the power to destroy them, but choosing silence just a little longer? That was me. Please, before I go on, tell me in the comments what country you're watching from. Have you ever been mocked, insulted, humiliated by someone who thought you'd never rise again? If yes, hit that like button. Share this video with someone who's been silent too long. Because what happened next changed everything. It was a Thursday. Sophia was showing off again, wearing a dress that could feed a village, stomping around in stilettos like she was some queen of cruelty. I had just served her lunch, chicken schnitzel on the fancy plate, while I ate plain boiled rice on a paper towel. She looked down at my food and chuckled. You know, sometimes I wonder why you haven't just dropped dead yet. You're like a cockroach, nasty, useless, but always crawling back. I smiled gently. Some cockroaches are radioactive, dear. She threw her fork across the table. It hit me in the chest. Don't get smart with me, she snapped. Derrick walked in and saw it happen. He looked at me, then her, then turned around and walked right back out. Coward. That afternoon, I limped into my room, closed the door quietly, and pulled out my phone. I dialed the police. I told them everything. Every slap. Every scar. Every threat. I gave them dates. Photographs I had secretly taken. Medical reports I had begged the hospital to print for me. Even an audio recording of Sophia threatening to kill me if I breathed too loudly. The officer on the other end went quiet for a long time. Then he said, Mrs. Ellington, why didn't you come to us sooner? I said, because I needed you to see the whole picture. He told me to stay quiet. They'd arrived the next day, with warrants. That night, Sophia yelled at me for forgetting to iron her blouse. She raised her hand to hit me again. And I said, "Go ahead. Make it good. The bruises photograph better when they're fresh." She blinked. Just a second too long. "What did you say?" I leaned forward, close enough for her to smell the fire in my voice. I said, "The cops like clean evidence." That's when I saw it, the flicker of fear. Tiny, almost invisible. But it was there. And that night, for the first time in years, I slept peacefully. Dear viewers, please comment if you've ever stood up to someone who thought you were powerless. Share your story. Share this video. Let them know we don't stay silent forever. Because by the time the police knocked the next morning, I was ready with tea, truth, and every document they needed. Viewers, have you ever seen someone who once ruled your world with cruelty suddenly look small, helpless, and cornered? Because the day Sophia was dragged out of my house in handcuffs, she didn't look like a queen anymore. She looked like a rat scrambling for a hole in a room full of light. But let's rewind just a little. That morning started like any other. I had bruises hidden beneath my sleeves, silence folded under my breath, and a quiet smile she didn't understand. Sophia was on the phone with one of her friends, laughing about some influencer brunch she wanted to attend. Honestly, I just keep Martha around to do the dirty work. She's like a background prop, old, mute, and breakable. She said that as she walked past me. Loud enough. On purpose. She didn't know that by 9 a.m., the front gate would be buzzing. She didn't know that 3 officers and a social worker would step inside our home with calm determination. She didn't know that I would hand them every photo, voice clip, and blood-stained blouse she ever caused. And she definitely didn't know that the house she strutted in like a goddess no longer belonged to her. When they entered, Derrick tried to stop them. "What's going on here?" "Why are you?" The lead officer cut him off. "Are you Mr. Derrick Ellington? You're listed as a co-resident and possible enabler. Please stand aside." Sophia stormed down the staircase in her silk robe. "Excuse me, what is this? Do you know who I am?" I stepped forward, holding the deed to the house. "Yes," I said softly. "You're the woman who's been torturing me in a home that now belongs to me." Her jaw dropped. She laughed, a high-pitched, ugly, desperate. "This hag is delusional. Derrick, tell them she's senile." Derrick looked at me, then at the police, then at the photos in the officer's hand. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Silence. Guilt. Cowardice in its purest form. Sophia lunged toward me, but the officer stepped between us. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for domestic abuse, elder neglect, and aggravated assault." "Anything you say, I'm pregnant," she screamed. The room froze. She wasn't. She just wanted pity. And that's when I said it right there, in front of the whole neighborhood. She once made me beg on the street while she fed our dog steak. Let her beg now. The officers let her out. Hair messy. Robe half open. All her power undone. Viewers, have you ever seen karma land perfectly? Comment if you've ever watched a monster fall. Share this with someone who needs to know. Silence doesn't mean surrender. Because that was the day her crown cracked. And I didn't lift a finger. Viewers, if your own child stood silently while you were being tortured, spat on, starved, and slapped in your own home, what would you do? Would you forgive them? Would you excuse it as weakness? Or would you finally realize that silence is betrayal dressed in politeness? I ask you, please comment below. Have you ever been betrayed by your own child or someone you raised with love? Tell me what country you're from. And if you know this kind of pain, please like, share, and let this story reach someone who thinks they're alone. Because I was alone for years. And the man who let it happen, who watched me bleed and said nothing, was the same boy I once carried for 9 long months. Derrick. Let me tell you about Derrick. He was a gentle boy once. The kind of child who brought me wildflowers from the front yard and cried if I scraped my hand cooking dinner. But somewhere along the way, after James passed, after he started seeing Sophia, something in him grew cold. Hard. Silent. He let Sophia scream at me. He let her throw water at me in winter. He let her beat me until my vision blurred. And every single time, I looked at him, waiting for the little boy I raised to return. But he never did. Even after the police took Sophia away, Derrick didn't speak to me for 3 days. He walked around the house like a ghost, mourning the queen he had chosen over his own mother. On the 4th morning, I made tea, sat at the same kitchen table where I once sat bruised and hungry, and called him in. He came reluctantly, dragging his feet like a teenager summoned for a scolding. "What now, Mum?" he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. I slid a folder across the table. Inside, legal documents, financial statements, proof of ownership. "That's the inheritance your father left for us. You didn't know because I didn't either, until I found the letter Sophia tried to hide." He blinked. Confused. Furious. Maybe even guilty. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" I leaned in slowly, my voice like ice. "Would you have believed me if I had?" Silence. "You stood by and let her break me. You ate dinner while I bled. You watched me sleep outside in the rain. You thought I was poor, so I deserved it." His hands clenched on the table. He couldn't look at me. "Mom, I didn't know what to do. You did nothing." My voice was louder now. Steady. Cold. "And now you want a share of the life you abandoned me in?" I asked. "You think you're still an heir, Derrick?" "No. You're just a guest now. A guest in a house I own, with money you'll never see." I stood up, walked around the table, stopped right behind him. "From now on," I whispered, "you'll eat what I serve. You'll sleep in the guest room. And if you ever raise your voice at me, you'll follow your wife out the door." In cuffs. His head dropped. He didn't say a word. That evening, I changed the locks, put all financial accounts in my name, transferred every title deed to my private trust, and updated the will. My heir would now be someone who knew compassion, not silence. That night, I slept in my bed. My warm, soft, queen-size bed. And Derrick? He slept on the same floor where I used to. Dear viewers, if you've ever had to take back what was stolen from you, tell me your story in the comments. Let the world know what silence really costs. Because my son didn't raise a hand against me, but he might as well have. And I paid him back in full. Viewers, do you believe in justice? Not the kind that comes from courts or lawyers, but the kind that comes from life, from fate, from God? Because I do now. If you've ever been mocked, humiliated, or called worthless by someone who thought they'd always be above you, I want you to tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Like this story. Share it. Tag someone who's ever been underestimated. Because today, I'm going to tell you how Sophia, yes, the same woman who used to spit in my food and call me nothing, now works as a kitchen helper in the hotel I secretly bought. Let me explain. After I secured my inheritance, took full ownership of the house, and legally removed Derrick from any rights to the family fortune, I realized something. I didn't want revenge that ended at home. No. I wanted revenge that echoed through every corner of her life. I wanted to watch her live my old life, feel every scrape of it, every hunger pain, every insult. You see, I didn't just receive money. I inherited shares in multiple businesses, one of which was a historic boutique hotel in Sydney called the Laurel Haven. It was elegant, expensive, and in desperate need of new staff in the kitchen after recent firings. One quiet Thursday morning, I visited the hotel in a silk scarf and diamond brooch, things I used to dream about while scrubbing Sophia's floors. And when I arrived at the service entrance, there she was. Sophia, hair tied back, apron stained, face pale and hollow. She didn't recognize me at first. I watched her slice vegetables while the head chef barked orders. She looked lost, tired, invisible. I stepped into the room, heels clicking softly on the tile. She turned her head. Her eyes widened. And Martha? I didn't smile. I didn't blink. I just stared at her like a queen seeing a peasant. "No," I said calmly. "Mrs. Ellington, the owner of this property. You may address me as ma'am." The room fell silent. The chef looked between us in confusion. Sophia's knife slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. "You can't. You're not. This isn't real," she stammered. "Oh, it's real," I said. "As real as every slap you gave me. As real as the day you made me beg for food while you wore diamond heels." She shook her head, stepping back like she'd seen a ghost. "Please. I didn't know. I was just angry. You thought I'd never rise," I said, cutting her off. "You thought poor old Martha would just die quietly while you drank wine from crystal." I turned to the chef. "She'll be washing the dishes from now on. And she's not to speak unless spoken to. I want those plates shining like the ones she never let me touch." Sophia looked like she might faint. And I felt nothing. No rage. No sorrow. No pity. Just justice. Viewers, do you believe that the ones who break us should be forced to taste the very suffering they caused? Tell me in the comments if you've ever dreamed of switching places with your abuser. Let this story reach every silent warrior still waiting for their day. Because today, Sophia wears rubber gloves and takes orders from people she used to laugh at. She doesn't live in my house anymore. She lives in a cramped flat behind the hotel where the lights flicker and the water leaks. Just like she once made me live. And every time she sees me walk past in silk and pearls, she bows her head and says, "Good morning, ma'am." Oh, how the mighty crumble. Viewers, have you ever looked into the eyes of the child you raised, the child you fed from your hands, the one you prayed for, only to realize that he wouldn't even have held your hand while you were dying? Because I did. And no matter how many nights I cried over it, the betrayal from your own blood cuts deeper than any stranger's knife. Please, before I tell you what happened, comment below if you've ever been betrayed by your son, your daughter, or someone you raised with love. Tell me which country you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, like, share, and send it to someone who needs the courage to reclaim their dignity. Let me take you to the moment everything changed between me and Derrick. After Sophia was arrested and later sentenced to community labor, I thought I'd feel peace. But I didn't, because the one person I truly needed to hear an apology from stayed silent. Derrick, my only son. He stayed in the guest room for weeks, skulking in and out of the house like a shadow. No apology. No explanation. No ounce of remorse. Until one rainy evening, he knocked on my door. He looked thinner. Eyes sunken. Shoulders slumped, not from humility, but shame. "Mom," he whispered, "can we talk?" I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I simply looked at him and walked to my armchair, the same one I used to sleep in when they wouldn't let me have a bed. He stood there in silence, fidgeting like a child caught stealing. I know I failed you," he said. "I didn't protect you. I was scared. I thought Sophia, don't say her name in my house." I cut him off without raising my voice. He froze. I let the silence stretch between us like the scar tissue over my bruises. "Mom, please. I want to make it right." I looked down at my feet. Swollen, cracked, wounded from years of walking barefoot across broken tiles and wet floors, banished to corners like I was an insect. "If you want to make it right," I said softly, "then kneel." He blinked. "What?" "You heard me. Kneel. And wash the feet of the woman who once walked the earth just to feed you." There was silence. Then, slowly, like the coward he had become, he dropped to his knees. I handed him a bowl of warm water and a white towel. He reached for my feet with trembling hands. He wept. He whispered apologies between sobs as he dabbed the towel against my old scars he helped create by doing nothing. "I'm so sorry, Mom. Please forgive me." And I said nothing, because I wasn't ready to forgive. Forgiveness isn't free. Not when the price was my dignity, my health, my humanity. He looked up at me with wet eyes and said, "Please. I've lost everything. You're all I have left." And I replied, "Now you know how I felt when you sat at that table with a full plate and left me starving." He cried harder. And I let him, because sometimes they need to drown in the same tears they once ignored. That night, I let him sleep in the house. But I didn't let him eat from my table. "You'll earn your way back into this home," I said. Not with words, with action. From then on, he cooked my breakfast, cleaned the floors, and picked up groceries. And every time he passed my bedroom door, he knocked first. Because a guest must show respect. Dear viewers, I ask you again, can someone who betrayed their own mother ever truly be forgiven? Comment your answer below. Share this video. Let's talk about the pain we don't put in family photo albums. Because that day, I didn't just watch my son wash my feet. I watched him finally understand the weight of silence. Viewers, have you ever been denied something your whole life, only to one day walk into the very space they told you you'd never belong in and sit down like you were born for it? That was the day I sat on my throne. Not made of gold, not velvet, but power, respect, legacy. Before I tell you how it happened, I want you to comment right now. Have you ever had a moment where you finally claimed the space that others tried to keep you out of? Tell me where you're watching from. Like this video if you believe every woman deserves her moment of justice, even if it takes years to come. Now let me take you to the day the boardroom forgot my name, until they couldn't anymore. You see, when I inherited my late husband's fortune, it wasn't just property and money. I also became the majority shareholder of Ellington Mining Limited, a company built on sweat, steel, and his family's name, yet not a single board member had ever met me. They all assumed I was just the widow, a woman to be sent a check, nodded at once a year, then forgotten. But I had other plans. The company had its annual general meeting scheduled in Melbourne. Sophia's arrest had already made waves in the local news, but no one knew who I really was. So I arrived quietly. I wore a navy blue suit. Simple, elegant, no jewelry, no fanfare. Just a folder of signed legal documents, a controlling stake in the company, and the determination of every woman who's ever been mocked and underestimated. When I entered the building, the receptionist didn't even look up at first. "Deliveries go through the back, love." I smiled. "I'm here for the shareholders' meeting." She frowned. "Are you lost, ma'am? The shareholders are all, I am the majority shareholder." Silence. The elevator doors opened, and I walked through them like I had done it 1,000 times. In the boardroom, they were already seated, 12 men, 3 women, all in press suits. Not a single one rose to greet me, until I reached the head of the table. "Excuse me," said one of the men, clearing his throat. "That seat is for the chairperson." "It is," I replied and opened the folder. Inside was my claim, the proof, the authority. They couldn't deny it. Whispers swept the room. One of them even stood and offered a handshake, but I didn't take it. I sat down, crossed my legs, and said, "Let's begin. I have changes to propose, starting with the retirement of those who've treated this company like their private playground." For the next 2 hours, I led the meeting. I rewrote board policies. I demanded audits. I laid out ethics reviews and gender equity standards. I saw jaws tighten, papers shuffle nervously. But no one objected, because I wasn't the poor widow anymore. I was the woman who owned their paychecks. And as I signed the final document of the day, I thought of Sophia, of Derrick, of the nights I sat on a tile floor with a bleeding lip while they laughed over steak. "Do you know what it feels like?" I asked the room, "to go from being your maid to your boss?" Silence. Only one woman in the room dared to nod, an accountant from Perth with tears in her eyes. She knew. She had her own Sophia somewhere. Dear viewers, this story isn't just mine. It's ours. It's for every mother, every woman, every elder who's ever been cast aside because she was too old or too poor or too weak. Comment if you've ever felt like your life was already written, only to prove them all wrong. Share this with someone who needs hope. Because I sat in the seat they said I'd never reach. And I didn't just sit in it, I owned it. Viewers, imagine this. The same woman who once dumped cold water on your head while you were sick. Who spat in your tea. Who kicked your walking stick away and laughed when you fell, now standing in front of you, hands trembling, as she pours your cup of tea. In public. in uniform, and under your command. If you've ever had a moment where life gave you the chance to make your abuser taste the bitterness they once fed you, tell me in the comments. Where are you watching from? And if this chapter touches you, please like, share, and let others hear what rising from pain really looks like. Now let me take you back to the tea lounge of the Laurel Haven Hotel, just 2 weeks ago. I'd requested a small afternoon gathering, a charity meeting for widows and elder women. I sat at the head of a polished mahogany table, wearing a pearl gray sari, hair pinned neatly, diamonds in my ears. Guests began to arrive, women from all walks of life, some younger, some older, but all touched by pain. We talked about housing, support programs, meals. I shared parts of my story. Not all, just enough to let them know they were safe in my presence. And then, the server entered the room. Her name tag read, Sophie, but we all knew who she was. Martha Ellington, my abuser, my daughter-in-law, the woman who once made me beg for food in my own home. She walked into the room with a tray of teapots, porcelain cups, and sugar cubes. Eyes down, shoulders tight. Her manager had no idea of our history. He just thought I requested tea service. But I had requested her specifically. She walked up to me first. Her eyes flicked upward for a second, just a moment of recognition, and I held her gaze. I said nothing. "Ma'am," she whispered, "your tea." "Louder, please," I said calmly. The other ladies didn't hear that. She hesitated. Her hands shook slightly. "Your tea, ma'am," she repeated. "Milk, no sugar," I reminded her. "You used to know that." She flinched, just a twitch. The sound of trauma resurfacing. The room went quiet. The other women stared, unsure of what they were witnessing. Sophia poured the tea with unsteady hands. One drop splashed over the rim and hit my finger. She gasped. "I'm so sorry." "Do it again," I said, placing the cup back on the tray. And this time, without shaking. She stood frozen, face pale, then quietly began again, hands clenched so tight they turned red. Once the tea was served, I lifted the cup, sipped it gently, then looked up and said, "Ladies, this is Sophia. She's recently joined our hospitality team. She's learning to be humble. Let's give her our encouragement." They clapped, kind, polite, unaware of the deeper meaning. But I could see one woman in the back, older, weathered, she knew. She nodded at me with tears in her eyes. I let Sophia stand there in silence for another minute, holding the tray, eyes burning with humiliation. Then I said softly, "You may go now. The table's clean." She turned and walked away. Not a word. Not a glance back. And I finished my tea slowly. Not because I was thirsty, but because revenge, when brewed right, should always be sipped slowly. Dear viewers, this was never about cruelty. It was about closure. About making sure that the same woman who once reduced me to nothing now understood exactly who she was dealing with. And it worked. Because now, every time Sophia sees me, she bows her head. Not because I asked her to, but because life finally made her look down. Viewers, there comes a moment when silence stops being safety and starts becoming a prison. I spent years locked in that prison. I let others decide my value. I let cruelty wear a pretty dress and call itself family. But one day, I stood up, and I spoke, and I didn't stop. Please tell me, have you ever spoken your truth after years of silence? Type "I spoke" in the comments if you've ever told someone what they did to you. And if you haven't yet, maybe this chapter will give you the courage. Let me tell you about the day I took the stage. The Women's Strength and Recovery Conference is one of the most respected events in our country. Survivors, activists, health workers, and leaders from all walks of life gather to share stories of endurance and empowerment. I was invited by an advocate I'd once shared a hospital room with. Back then, she gave me half her sandwich because I hadn't eaten in 2 days. Now, she was on the organizing committee, and she told me, "Martha, your story could save lives." At first, I said no. I was afraid. I didn't want to relive the pain. But then I looked in the mirror. I saw the scars. Not just on my skin, but in my eyes. The kind you carry even when the wounds have closed. And I thought of all the women who were still sitting in silent corners, bleeding behind closed doors, begging for help with no one listening. I said yes. The auditorium held over 500 women. The lights were hot. The microphone was taller than I was. They introduced me by my married name, Mrs. Martha Ellington, survivor, businesswoman, philanthropist. But when I stepped up to the podium, I began with, I'm not here today as a title. I'm here as a mother who was beaten, a woman who was spat on, a human being who was left to rot by the people who were supposed to love her. The room went still. No phones, no whispers, just breath. I told them everything. How my daughter-in-law beat me until I bled. How my own son watched and turned away. How I slept on tile floors, ate scraps from the trash, and once begged in public for coins while they dined on lobster. I saw women wipe their tears. Some nodded, some sobbed, and I told them. I found a letter that changed everything, a letter that made me rich. But wealth wasn't my power, truth was. I didn't want just money. I wanted my voice back. And when I finally used it, the world changed around me. I ended my speech with this. If you're watching this, if you've ever suffered in silence, if you think you're too old, too weak, too late, let me tell you something. They were wrong about you. They were always wrong. And the day you speak up will be the day your life starts again. The entire hall stood up, clapping, crying, some shouting, thank you, through tears. And I stood there, finally taller than every voice that ever tried to silence me. Dear viewers, if you've ever needed to tell your story, but didn't know where to start, tell it here. This comment section is yours. This video is yours. Like and share this story. Because somewhere, another woman is waiting for the day she stops surviving and starts living. And for me, that day was real. That day had a microphone. And on that day, I wasn't just heard. I was believed. Viewers, there are apologies that come quickly, like bandages tossed on wounds. But then there are the other ones, the ones that come too late, dragging behind them years of silence, betrayal, and pain so deep that even an I'm sorry sounds like an insult. Let me ask you, have you ever had someone beg you for forgiveness after ignoring your cries for years? Did you let them back in? Or did you keep the door shut? Comment below, I want to know where you're from and how you handled it. Like and share this chapter with someone who's still struggling to decide if they should forgive or finally walk away. Now let me take you to the night Derrick finally shattered. It was raining. The kind of slow, steady rain that soaks everything but offers no thunder, no drama. Just quiet punishment from the sky. I was in my bedroom, sitting near the fireplace with a wool blanket around my shoulders. The warmth of the flames had replaced the cold silence that once filled this house. And then I heard it. A soft knock, not at the front door, at my bedroom door. I didn't respond. It knocked again. Then a voice, broken, hoarse, barely above a whisper. Mum, please. Just, please let me speak to you. Still, I said nothing, because I remembered too clearly the hundreds of nights I cried behind that same door after Sophia had slapped me and laughed, while Derrick lay in bed just 10 feet away, doing nothing. That silence had earned him this silence. But he didn't leave. I heard the soft thud of him sitting on the floor, then the sound of him weeping. Not sniffles, not showy sobs. Genuine, heavy, chest-breaking weeping. I'm sorry, he whispered through the door. I'm sorry I let her hurt you. I'm sorry I stood there while you cried. I was weak. I was ashamed. I don't deserve your love, Mom, but I swear to God, I'll earn back every drop of it if you'll just let me try. His voice cracked, then silence. Then, minutes later, he added something that pierced through my chest. You fed me when you had nothing, and I let her starve you. You clothed me when your hands were shaking, and I let her strip your dignity away. Please, Mom, don't let my last memory of you be your back turned to me. And then, He fell asleep there, curled up outside my door, on the same cold floor where I once lay bleeding. That night, I didn't open the door, but I placed a blanket under it, quietly, without a word, because I needed more than just an apology. I needed change. The next morning, when I opened the door, he was still asleep, his face stained with tears, lips chapped, hair messy, like a boy again. I didn't wake him. I stepped over him, went to the kitchen, and brewed 2 cups of tea. When he came in, unsure if he'd be screamed at or thrown out, I simply pushed 1 cup toward him and said, "You'll drink. You'll work. You'll heal. But you'll never forget. And forgiveness isn't a gift. It's a contract. And you, Derrick, will have to sign it with your life from now on." He nodded, and for the first time since he was 12, he held my hand. Not as a son, but as a man trying to rebuild the mother he had shattered. Viewers, I ask you one last time today, is forgiveness possible after betrayal from your own child? Comment below. Share your story. Share this one. Let's make space for women to speak, even when their own family tried to silence them. Because that night, my son finally slept in my shadow, not above it. And I finally slept without fear. Viewers, tell me honestly, if someone beat you, starved you, humiliated you, then tried to steal your money, would you spend that money on yourself? Would you build walls to protect you? Or would you break walls down to protect others? Today, I want to tell you about the day I gave away the very fortune they once tried to destroy me for, and how, in doing so, I gained something that no inheritance can buy. If you believe that real power is in giving, not hoarding, please like and share this video. And tell me in the comments, what would you do with your pain if it came wrapped in millions? Now let me take you to the day I walked into the same bank where Sophia once laughed at my broken shoes. It was the flagship branch of the Ellington Trust, now under my name. The same trust she and Derrick once hoped to claim in full, believing I'd die quietly and leave them to feast on my remains. But I was still alive. And now, the account balance was mine. I wore a simple white shawl and carried a small leather folder. No bodyguards. No fanfare. Just me, walking into a place where my name once meant nothing. The branch manager, a man who used to look through me like I was invisible, stood and almost bowed when he saw me. "Mrs. Ellington, we weren't expecting. I didn't come for a balance update," I said, handing him the folder. "I came to transfer 2 million Australian dollars to the Women's Shelter Expansion Project." His eyes widened. "You're donating it?" "Yes," I said. "To build 10 new homes for elderly women who've been abandoned, beaten, or made to beg like I once was. And I'm funding medical access, hot meals, and employment training." He was speechless. But I wasn't done. "I'm also creating a scholarship for women over 50 who want to study again. Because society treats aging like failure. I want to turn it into a second chance." He blinked. "Would you like your name on the buildings?" I smiled. "No. Put the name of every woman who died in silence. This is not about me. It's about them. All of us. And viewers." I meant it. Because that money? It was never mine. It was the universe saying, "Here, take what they tried to bury you with and use it to build staircases for others." Later that week, I visited one of the shelters. There was a woman there, about 65, face covered in bruises, hands trembling as she clutched her blanket. She looked at me and said, "You look strong. Were you always this strong?" And I told her no. I was once you. And one day, you'll be me. We cried together. Not tears of pain. Tears of possibility. Dear viewers, if you've ever dreamed of turning your pain into purpose, type "I will rise" in the comments. Let someone scrolling by stop and read your strength. Share this story. Spread this truth. Because Sophia and Derrick wanted my money. They wanted to wear it, drink it, parade it. But I used it to build a kingdom for the broken. And I would do it again. Viewers, there's something powerful about watching the same person who once called you useless now standing in front of you, broken, humble, and desperate for mercy. But mercy is earned. And on the day Sophia came crawling back into my life, begging for help, I didn't scream. I didn't hit her. I didn't spit the way she once spat in my face. No, I handed her a mop. Before I tell you what happened, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had someone come back into your life only when they needed something? Someone who once hurt you, then needed your kindness? Comment, I remember if you've experienced that. Tell me what country you're watching from. And if you believe abusers should learn the value of humility, like and share this story with someone who's walked through fire and survived. Now, here's what happened. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was at the Laurel Haven Hotel, checking in on the kitchen staff, inspecting the renovations I had paid for with my own inheritance. The same hotel Sophia was still working in after the court reduced her sentence to 2 years of mandatory community labor under my business. She kept her head low, always in the back. She never made eye contact. Until that day, she approached me slowly, wiping her hands on her apron, face pale from exhaustion. Her shoes were worn out, hair pulled back into a bun that had long since lost its pride. "Mrs. Ellington," she said, barely able to meet my eyes. I need to talk to you." I paused, turned toward her, said nothing. "I'm sorry," she continued. "I know I was cruel. I know I don't deserve your kindness. But I'm living in a roach-infested unit with no hot water. I haven't seen Derrick in weeks. I have no money. No one will hire me after your speech went viral. I don't want to live like this anymore. Please, help me." She was crying. Genuine tears. Maybe for herself. Maybe for what she'd lost. Maybe even for what she'd done. But I didn't flinch. I simply said, "There's a mop in the supply room. The guest hallway near the conference wing needs deep cleaning. Scrub every inch on your knees. If I see effort, if I see humility, I might speak with you again. But until then, you're just an employee." Her lip quivered. She almost said something, maybe a curse, maybe another plea. But then she lowered her eyes and walked away. I watched her from the balcony later that day on her knees, scrubbing the marble floors she used to stride across in stilettos. And it hit me, she used to force me to wash her shoes. Now she was wiping the footprints of strangers for minimum wage. But I didn't feel joy. What I felt was balance. That night, I sat by my fireplace and whispered a message to the women who never got their justice. This isn't revenge. This is remembering. This is showing them that what you do to someone in their lowest moment will return to you when they rise. Dear viewers, if someone who once tortured you came back and begged for help, would you forgive them? Would you offer a second chance? Or would you let them learn the same silence they forced upon you? Tell me in the comments. Let your voice be heard. Because that day, Sophia learned something she never understood before. Kindness from the broken is not weakness. It is power. And mine had finally arrived. Viewers, have you ever looked at a place where you once suffered, where your bones ached, where your heart broke, and instead of destroying it, you chose to transform it? Not to erase the past, but to reclaim it. To take the very room where you were humiliated and make it holy. Because that's exactly what I did. Today, I want to tell you about the day I turned my old bedroom, where Sophia used to lock me in without food, into a warm, sacred space for mothers just like me. If you believe that the deepest wounds can become sacred scars, like and share this story. Comment where you're watching from. And tell me, if you could rebuild one room in your life, what would you make it into? Let me take you back. It had been nearly 3 months since Sophia had been sentenced to community labor at my hotel, and Derrick had begun rebuilding his place in my life through daily service and silence. He never asked for forgiveness anymore. He just acted like a son again. But there was still one part of the house I had left untouched. My old room. The same room where Sophia once threw her dirty laundry on my pillow. Where she once screamed, "You don't get a mattress until you start acting human." Where I once curled up in the corner, clutching a piece of stale bread, praying for death because life felt worse. I hadn't gone in since I took back control, but one morning, As the sun filtered through the window and kissed the edge of the hallway, I paused outside the door. And I opened it. The dust greeted me first. But behind that came the memories, the cries, the prayers. And I realized something. I didn't want to erase the pain. I wanted to rewrite the meaning of that space. So I picked up the phone and made calls. Over the next 2 weeks, my team of builders, decorators, and volunteers transformed the room entirely. Gone were the moldy curtains and broken dresser. In came soft lavender walls, a hand-carved reading chair, silk bedding, warm lights, healing music, and a window seat overlooking the garden I planted with my own hands. I named it the Sanctuary, not just for me, but for every abandoned, abused, or grieving mother who needed a night to rest. I partnered with local women's shelters to offer temporary stays in my home. Yes, my home, for elder women who were recovering from trauma. No paperwork, no judgment. Just tea, warm blankets, and a handwritten note on each pillow that read, "You are not alone anymore. You are not too old to be loved." The first guest was named Janet. Age 73, beaten by her son, thrown out by her daughter-in-law. Sound familiar? She cried when she saw the room. Cried harder when I told her it was free. And when I tucked her in that night and kissed her forehead, she held my hand and said, "You're the mother this world forgot to give me." Viewers, if you believe that healing begins when we give others what we never received ourselves, comment, "I choose healing." Tag a friend who needs to know their pain isn't the end, because I could have torn that room down. But instead, I made it sacred. And now, that room, that little lavender sanctuary, has held 13 different women since I opened it. Each one came in broken. Each one left standing, just like I did. Viewers, there was a time when no one wanted to hear me speak. When my voice was considered background noise, like the clatter of dishes in the kitchen or the groaning of an old woman sweeping behind a locked door. But that changed, because one day, the same world that ignored me came knocking. And this time, they brought cameras. Before I take you into that moment, I want to ask, have you ever had a chance to tell your truth publicly after years of being silenced privately? If so, type "I finally spoke" in the comments. Tell me what country you're watching from. And if this story inspires you, please like and share it so other women find strength too. Now let me tell you about the moment my silence became a headline. It all began with a reporter from a national women's magazine. She had attended the women's conference where I spoke weeks earlier. Afterward, she sent me a handwritten letter. "Dear Mrs. Ellington, I've heard thousands of stories from women around the world. But yours haunts me in the best way. Would you be willing to share it with the nation?" I hesitated. Not because I was afraid anymore, but because this wasn't just my story. It was the story of every woman who had ever been discarded, dismissed, disrespected, and left to suffer in silence. It was sacred. So I said yes, but on one condition: I'll speak. But I won't be painted as a victim. I want the world to see a woman who was broken and then built herself again, brick by brick, from blood and betrayal. The interview was held in my garden, the same garden I planted after Sophia was taken away, using the same soil where I once cried at night like a buried seed. The crew arrived with lights, microphones, and soft smiles. But what they didn't expect was fire. The interview started gently. "Mrs. Ellington, what would you say to women who are still living with abuse in silence?" I looked directly at the camera. You may think silence is safer, but it's not. It's poison disguised as protection. And the longer you keep it inside, the more it eats your soul. Speak, cry, run, fight. Do whatever you must. But do not let anyone make you believe you're less than human. The journalist's eyes welled with tears. I continued. I told them about the tea I was denied, the rice I ate cold off the floor, the hospital visit I walked home from barefoot, the years of bruises Sophia left on my body, and the emptier scars Derrick left with his silence. I told them about the letter that changed everything, and how instead of using the money to hurt, I used it to heal others. I spoke for over 2 hours. And when it aired on national television that Sunday night, it broke every record. Thousands of women wrote to me. Thousands more left comments like, "You just told my story with your voice." I've been silent for 40 years. Tonight, I told my daughter everything. My mother went through this. I wish she'd lived to hear you. The media called me a lioness in pearls. But I wasn't interested in labels. I was interested in justice. The hotel received a flood of donations for the sanctuary rooms. My speech was translated into 5 languages. I was invited to speak at universities, shelters, even international conferences. And Sophia? She watched it all from the break room at the hotel, mop in hand, sweat on her brow, regret in her eyes. Dear viewers, if you ever think your voice doesn't matter, let this be your proof. One woman's truth can become a floodlight for thousands. Comment if you believe this. Like this video if you've ever needed someone to speak the words you couldn't. And remember, they may have silenced you once, but that doesn't mean they get the last word. Viewers, there was a time I didn't celebrate my birthday. Not because I didn't want to, but because they made sure I didn't feel worth celebrating. Sophia would pretend she forgot. Derrick never even asked. And the one year I baked a small cake for myself, she tossed it in the trash and said, "You're too old for candles. You should be grateful we let you live here at all." That day, I cried in the laundry room, alone, with detergent on my hands and shame in my chest. But today, I want to tell you about the year I finally took back my birthday. The year I turned pain into pride and invited every woman they once laughed at to sit at my table. If you've ever felt forgotten on your birthday, especially by people who were supposed to love you, comment, "I remember," below. Tell me what country you're from. And if you believe that age should be honored, not hidden, like and share this story so others hear it too. Now let me take you to my birthday. It was my 69th. And it was the first birthday I planned for myself without fear, shame, or permission. The invitations were hand-delivered, each one written in gold cursive and addressed to women I had met in shelters, in clinics, in street markets, in recovery rooms. Women who had been mocked for being old, poor, overweight, loud, divorced, childless, or too motherly. Women who had been told their best years were behind them. Each invitation read, "You are not a leftover. You are the main course. You are not too late. You are exactly on time. Come celebrate the day I was born and the day we stopped apologizing for existing." The event was held in the garden behind the Laurel Haven Hotel, my garden. The same one I planted with bare hands when no one believed I owned anything, now filled with lanterns, roses, jasmine, and long white tables covered in silk. They arrived slowly, dozens of them. Women in colorful saris, oversized sweaters, vintage hats, torn shoes polished with care. And every single one carried something more beautiful than a gift, a story, a scar, a battle survived. Some came walking, some limping, some held each other's arms like sisters reuniting after war. I stood at the gate and greeted each of them with a kiss on the cheek and a whisper in their ear, "You belong here." There was no DJ, no fancy band, just music from our youth, played softly through speakers hidden in the flower beds. And laughter, the kind that blooms when people are finally safe. I gave a toast. I stood under a string of lanterns and raised my glass of rosewater. To the women who never got parties, who never got flowers unless they bought them themselves, who blew out candles in secret and pretended they didn't care. Tonight is not just my birthday. It is our rebirth. They cried. They laughed. We ate cake without shame, took pictures without filters, danced barefoot until the moon began to blush. And somewhere in the distance, I saw Sophia, sweeping crumbs from the patio, eyes full of a sadness that came not from punishment, but from the realization that she had lost access to the very love she once trampled. She looked at the women, at me, and I knew what she was thinking. She's not just alive. She's adored. Dear viewers, if you've ever felt invisible on the day you were born, let this be a reminder. You deserve a celebration. Not for what you've done, but simply because you survived. Comment below. What's one birthday memory you've never forgotten, good or bad? And remember to like and share this story. Because your age is not a countdown. It's a crown. And it's time you wore it. Viewers, this is the moment I had dreamed of. Not because I wanted to be cruel. Not because I wanted to punish anyone. But because for once in my life, I got to decide. Not them. Not their rules. Me. This is the story of the day all the people who abandoned me, who hurt me, dismissed me, ignored my pain, came back, not with weapons, but with empty hands. And for the first time, I held all the power. Before I take you there, I want to ask you, have you ever had someone return only after they realized you were no longer weak? Did you forgive them? Did you help them? Comment, I chose if you've ever had to make that decision. Tell me where you're watching from. And if this story has touched your heart, please like and share so it finds the women who still believe they're powerless. Now let me take you to the final door they knocked on. It started with Derrick. He'd been quiet for months, doing the chores, tending to the garden, helping at the shelter, never asking for anything. Until one morning, he stood in front of me holding a document. "Mom," he said softly, "I've been offered a job overseas. It's a good role, but I can't leave without asking you something first." I raised an eyebrow. "What is it? Will you bless me to go? I know I don't deserve it, but I've tried, and I want to start again. Please tell me I can carry your love with me." I didn't speak for a moment. I looked at my son, the one who had once looked away while I was beaten, the one who now watered roses and scrubbed floors without complaint. Then I placed my hand on his shoulder. "Go," I said. "But remember, what you didn't protect once, you must protect in others now. Be better. And don't forget the mother who rose when you fell." He cried, kissed my hand. He left with nothing but my blessing. Then came Sophia. She didn't knock. She waited outside the garden gate, in the very spot where she once made me kneel with a trash bag in my hands. I saw her standing there, thin, exhausted, pale from stress and shame. I walked to her slowly. She didn't look up. "Mrs. Ellington," she began, "I've been accepted into a part-time program for elder care nursing. I want to work in shelters. I want to help women like the ones I hurt. But I need a letter of reference. And I have no one but you. I understand if you say no. I had to ask." There it was. Not pride, not power, but the same kind of brokenness I once carried in silence. I stepped forward. "You will never undo what you did to me, Sophia. But if you really want to help women now, then your hands must clean more than floors. They must clean the mess you made of your own soul." She nodded, and I handed her a pen. "I'll write the letter, but you'll write your truth. Every week. To one woman in that shelter. Handwritten. No lies. No shortcuts. If you're willing to do that, then yes, I'll help you." She fell to her knees, thanked me through tears, and walked away, slower than she came, but lighter than I'd ever seen her. Viewers, that was the day they all came to me for help. And that was the day I finally realized power doesn't come from revenge. It comes from having the right to say yes or no, and knowing you earned that choice. I didn't forgive to be noble. I forgave to be free. Dear viewers, thank you for walking with me through this story, from the day they beat me to the day I rose. This story is no longer just mine. It's yours. It belongs to every woman who's ever wondered if it's too late. It's not. Comment below. What chapter of your life are you in right now? And if you've survived something, tell the world here. Like, share, subscribe. Not for me, but for every mother, every widow, every elder who's ever been told their time is over. Because as long as your heart beats, you are just getting started.